Chapter 15 discusses a period known in American history as Reconstruction. This is the time period that came after the American Civil War. It's a couple highlights about the American Civil War and what it led to. Um, Overall, you had at the end of the war the ratification of the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which abolished slavery forever. This was a tremendous achievement of the war, and what Lincoln said was the second goal after preserving the Union and bringing the 11 states that had seceded um, back from being in rebellion back to their, quote, proper place in relationship under the Constitution. As a result of the 13th Amendment, approximately 4 million human beings who were previously enslaved by rich, wealthy enslavers who were a marked minority within the South, who had orchestrated the Civil War to perpetuate slavery. And these are their own words, saying that they were fighting to preserve slavery because Lincoln's election in the Northern government was a threat to the institution of slavery. This placed the greatest task upon the federal government following the war and the bloodshed, which we now believe probably resulted in about 750,000 Americans dying in the 4 years of fighting in the American Civil War. But the main tasks were A, how do you reincorporate these states that committed treason back into the Union, equal with the states that were loyal to the United States in the Civil War? And then secondly, how do you prepare and transition 4 million formerly enslaved people into freedom? And what does that freedom look like? And these tasks, specifically dealing with freedmen, as they were called, the formerly enslaved, were left unfinished. And that was the work that individuals like Malcolm X and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. aimed to rectify in the civil rights movement of the 20th century. So in one way, Reconstruction is a success because those 11 states are brought back into the Union. They do acknowledge the 13th Amendment and later the 14th and 15th Amendments, which grant citizenship and voting rights to all males within the United States. But tragically, because of a group of Southerners that we call broadly redeemers, the goals of transitioning the formerly enslaved into equality with their white counterparts throughout the United States is a colossal failure. And these are the facts. And that is why Dr. King, 100 years later, after Reconstruction, has to say, I have a dream that one day my daughters will be treated by the content of their character and not by the color of their skin. And in many ways, even today, we have a ways to go to truly realize true equality as we deal with racism, anti-Semitism, prejudice, stereotyping that still goes on today. So that's one of the failures of the Reconstruction period, is that you see groups like Redeemers, the rise of Jim Crow, the rise of the KKK, and other groups of people throughout the United States, even in the states that were loyal to the Union. The Klan is very strong in the North in certain areas, specifically in places like New Jersey in the early 20th century. But you have this failure to adequately transition the formerly enslaved into their rightful position of equality amongst their white counterparts. Finally, just in closing, as you delve into this chapter, which is a critical chapter beginning sort of the second half of the study of United States history, it's, who won the Civil War? Well, obviously the Union, the North, won the Civil War as far as militarily. But secondly, who won the peace? I think, and that is the greater question. And if you ask leading civil rights activists like W.B. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, Dr. King, Malcolm X, the aforementioned, the answer is simple, is that the South was able to win the peace, meaning they won the Reconstruction period by bringing back whatever that Southern way of life previous to the Civil War, when slavery was intact, is that you have a group of marginalized and oppressed people who before the war were chained and legally were held as property, to after the war, with 750,000 dead, three-quarter of a million Americans dead, that they were still sort of, not physically chained, as they would say, but they were sort of chained to the land through sharecropping, chained to the oppression of the legal system through convict leasing, through Jim Crow laws and black codes. They were oppressed and marginalized and were not truly free because of the terrorist organization, the KKK, and the failure of the federal government to adequately take care of these people who, rightfully so, deserve the protection of the federal government from these redeemers who were very successful at reinstilling the old South after the American Civil War. And that is the tragedy, so to speak, to put it lightly, of Reconstruction, is that its goals were not truly reached when dealing with the freedmen population. If you would like 10 extra points on your first paper, please add in a separate section at the bottom of your paper one of the quotes from the Reconstruction PowerPoint that is placed in Module 1, and a brief 1 to 2 sentence reflection as to why that quote from any of those slides that I have given you, that I would lecture in full in a face-to-face class, why that quote resonates with you. And the PowerPoints are filled with these direct quotes from individuals, Confederate leaders, Union leaders, civil rights activists, the formerly enslaved, et cetera, et cetera. So that'll be 10 points if you add that at the end of your paper. Thank you.